Hello options traders, welcome back everyone. I wanted to post another technical analysis video here for all of the traders in this group called the price relative. Sometimes you'll hear it called the price relative indicator. You'll also hear it called the relative strength indicator, but don't confuse that with the more common relative strength index. Those are two different indicators. But the price relative indicator is a powerful way to compare your stock against another stock in the same industry, usually what we call one of its peers, or to compare your stock against the broad-based market, such as measured against the S&P 500. So let's jump over to an Excel spreadsheet and take a look at the price relative indicator. All right, so here we are in an Excel spreadsheet, and I've just created a hypothetical combination of stocks here just to make the examples easier to follow. Because even though the calculations are easy, the interpretations get mixed up, especially among new traders. So here's the way it's going to work. We're going to take a look at a list of dates. At least this is the way that your computer is going to see it when you're putting this indicator on your broker's platform. And then it's going to take a look at two different stocks, or a stock against an index. Let's just call them A and B. And I've got stock A at 100 and stock B at 200. So the price relative right here is 50%, and that is calculated by simply taking A divided by B. So 100 divided by 200, of course, is 50%. So that's our price relative. We go down to the next day. We take the price of stock A, in this example is 101, price of stock B is 202. We divide them out, and again, we get 50%. Now, the reason that we're getting the same 50% all the way down is because I have made stock A and stock B both increase by 1% per day. So I've just made a little formula up here to multiply each day by 1.01 times the previous day's price. So therefore, because A and B are both rising at the same rate, we're going to get a flat line over here in blue. So if we graph this column right here, our price relatives, that's where the graph is coming from, it's going to be a flat line. And again, new traders often think that because these prices are rising, that our graph should be rising. But remember, you're not graphing prices, you're graphing the relative performance between these two. Well, now let's change it up. Let's say that stock A rises by 2% per day, so we'll make this 1.02. We'll let B rise by the same 1% per day. So again, notice that the price of A is rising every day, and the price of B is rising every day. Both stocks are rising, but A is rising at a faster rate than B. And so notice what it does to our price relatives. These numbers are increasing. And because these numbers are increasing, we're going to get an increasing line on our graph. So once again, don't think that just because the line is increasing, that it necessarily means that both stocks are increasing. I could actually make B decrease. Let's subtract off 1% per day, same as multiplying by 0.99. It's going to make it increase even more. A is rising, B is falling, so yes, A is definitely outperforming B now. And that's why we're starting to get this acceleration in the graph. But now here's probably one of the more common issues where traders misinterpret the numbers. Let's say that A falls 1% per day. Again, that's the same as multiplying each day by 0.99 times the previous day's price. But B falls 2% per day. So we'll make that 0.98. Both columns of numbers here are decreasing. Notice A is going from 100, 99, 98, and so on. It's falling. B is starting at 200. It's also falling every single day. Both stocks are falling. So why is our graph over here rising? Because A is still outperforming B. It's falling at a slower rate. Again, it's only falling 1% per day, whereas B is falling 2% per day. So I can also get a falling graph even though both stocks are rising. Let's say that A is rising 1% per day, but B is rising at 2% per day. Again, both sets of stocks are increasing. They're both making money. So the reason that our graph over here appears to be falling, again, is because of the relative performance between them. A is only rising at 1% per day, whereas B is rising at 2% per day. So if we're comparing A to B, A is falling against B, and that's why our graph is falling. So once you see what's happening here, the indicator becomes fairly simple. Now, mathematically, let me show you something else that's happening. Here you can see that our price relative is dropping. Again, that's just taking A divided by B, and it's falling at about 0.98%. If I were to take the percentage change from 50% down to 49.51, that's a fall of 0.98%. Mathematically, that's the same thing as taking the percentage change in A, which is 1%, moving from 100 to 101, and comparing it to the percentage change in B, going from 200 to 204, which obviously is 2%. And if we subtract them out, 1% minus 2%, we get minus 1%. So again, we're getting negative numbers, and that's why our graph is falling. But this number right here in column F, this minus 0.98, should be reasonably close to this number. Again, just showing the percentage change differences between A and B. There are some mathematical reasons that it's not going to be exact, but that will give you a better idea of what you're actually looking at. We're saying take the percentage change in A, subtract off the percentage change in B, and we're looking at that difference, the relative performance between these two stocks. So hopefully that helps you to understand what you're looking at. The main thing I want you to understand is that when you see your graph falling like this, don't assume that the stock prices are necessarily falling. Both prices could be rising, but if your stock is rising at a slower rate than the comparative stock, then you will see this graph go down. So let's go over to the E-Trade platform and take a look at the price relative index in action. So here's the E-Trade platform, and I've got Home Depot just happens to be up there at the top, so I'm going to leave it. This is the stock, sometimes what we would call the base stock. And we now want to pull up our price relative indicator. So in this platform, you're going to choose Studies, come down here to All Studies, and then we're going to look under the P's, and right down here is Price Relative. Choose that, and it's now going to ask for a comparison symbol. So I might compare it to one of its peers, let's say to Lowe's, or probably more commonly would compare it to the overall market. So let's compare it to the S&P 500. I'm going to use the spiders right here at the top. I can also change the color of the line. I'm going to leave it at black and then choose Save. Let's go ahead and lift this up a bit so we can see it better. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of different points here. Let's look at this nice rally that Home Depot had through here. So let's drop a couple of vertical lines through here and through this peak right here. What does this tell us? Well, again, I can see that Home Depot had a nice rally through here. Well, how did it do compared to the overall market? Well, look at your price relative down below. Because this black line is also increasing, it tells me that Home Depot was outperforming my comparative stock, or SPY in this case. It was outperforming the overall market. I don't know, at least by looking at this graph, if the S&P was falling or if it was just rising at a slower rate. All I know is that Home Depot was outperforming it, and I can instantly see that because this black line is increasing. But now let's move our comparison points. Let's take a look at this peak right here, and let's say down through this low point right here. What do we know? Well, you can see that Home Depot was falling. Again, these candles are just for the stock. But if we look at our price relative down here, it's also falling. And that tells me that Home Depot was underperforming the S&P 500. Once again, just by looking at this graph down below, this price relative, I don't know if the S&P was rising or if it was just falling at a slower rate. All I know is that my base stock, Home Depot here, is underperforming the S&P 500. So hopefully that gives you a basic idea of how to read the price relative. There's a number of things you can glean from it. Probably the most important for most of you is just to see how your individual stocks are holding up to the overall market. After all, if your stock is underperforming the S&P 500, you have to question what's the benefit. You're taking more risk for less return. So it's not a bad idea to take a look at the price relative. Another thing you can watch for are bullish and bearish divergences. So for example, let's come over to this segment here. Let's drop a couple of vertical lines between here and here. Now overall, Home Depot was declining. I think everybody knows that around October 4th through the end of the year, we were in a declining market. S&P 500 was just coming unglued. So really all stocks were falling. But what do we know? Look towards the tail end right here. The price relative was actually rising, and that tells you that Home Depot was falling at a slower rate. It was outperforming the S&P 500. And sometimes that can be a really powerful indicator because the stocks that are getting, let's say, beat up the least in a bad market are usually the first to rebound the strongest. So that's what's called a bullish-bearish divergence. Again, the stock was bearish, but this was showing a bullish pattern here in the comparison. So try it out. Let me know what you think. Take a look at the price relative, and hopefully that will give you better insights for your trading. So give it a shot. Let me know what you think. Try out the price relative, and it will at least give you better insights into the stocks that you're holding compared to the overall market. If you'd like to learn more about the art and science of options trading, please check out the Alpha Trader course and strategy lab at optionsatoz.com. Also, please join us on the Facebook trading group Options A to Z, and you can find a link in the description below.